Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Writer's Parachute, where we are guiding author and writer dreams to a perfect landing. Today, we have with us a very special guest from the other side of the pond. We have Muz Murray. He is an author and spiritual mentor, and we're going to be talking to him in a few minutes about his children's book, Old Mother West Wind Tales. It's a very good collection of children's stories, so we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. And of course, we want to get on with the show, and we want to talk to our very special guest from the UK. It's Muz Murray. He is an author and spiritual mentor. We're going to be talking to him about several of his books, mostly his children's book, Old Mother West Wind Tales. Muz, you want to hold up those books for us? So Muz Murray began his career as a surrealist painter, very much influenced by Salvador Dali, with whom he became acquainted when living in Spain. Muz also stretched his talents as a writer, actor, and designer for theater and film in many countries. During a 7-year period as a vagabond, Muz dangerously hitchhiked the length of Africa, spent 3 years as a wandering monk in India, became the founder editor of Gandalf's Garden magazine and Mystical Community. As a psychotherapist, he was the co-founder of the Open Center for Spiritualized Psychotherapy in London. For the past 50 years, he has quietly traveled the world as a spiritual mentor and mantra master, teaching mantra and Advaita Vedanta workshops in many countries. And I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly. After his wild adventures in Africa and India, the media began calling him the Indiana Jones of yoga, although Muz states that he is now more often mistaken for Gandalf. Author of 5 books on spiritual themes and 2 children's books, including an esoteric fairy tale fantasy called Ifelpin Island, which was written and recorded for BBC Radio 4. He is the editor for 2 magazines with interviews from BBC, Dutch and Italian TV, as well as in the US, in California, Colorado, Denver, and many radio programs. His latest book on spiritual insights, You Are the Light, Secrets of the Sages Made Simple, helps seekers clarify their problems. And his latest children's book, which we're going to talk about, Old Mother West Wind Tales, is available worldwide wherever books are sold. Welcome to the Writer's Parachute, Muz. How are you today?
I'm great, if very sweaty. It's very high degrees over here, and I've just put more light on, so I'll cook even more. But I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, we are very delighted to have you here. And it's like, you have led such an interesting and esoteric life. And I just want to know how all of that kind of gets melded together to influence your writing, because your writing is just kind of covering so many different topics. I just want to know how all of that mixes together and comes out with these amazing books.
Well, I'm not really sure that all that has influenced my writing or not, but other than giving my books a greater depth as a result of my insights and spiritual experience, when I write, the answers to deep questions seem to come from somewhere beyond, and some kind of influence just shows me the way that I should structure the sentences and arrange words in the best possible way to help people understand these deep esoteric subjects. So I can't take any credit for that.
Well, I think you're being a little bit modest here, but do you think that your travel and experience have made you a better writer? And if so, how do you think that that's made you a better writer? I mean, you sort of touched on that, but I want to get into it a little deeper.
Well, obviously my travels and adventures in Africa and India gave me a much broader perspective on life, but I think it was really only reading and constant practice that has made me a better writer. I started out as a surrealist painter, as you mentioned, but when I set off to hitchhike around the world, I couldn't carry my easel and all the painting gear around with me. So whenever I got stuck in some exotic or utterly hellish place, my creativity had to come out in writing. So I carried on working on a children's book that I'd started some years before. And I was also keeping a travel journal. So when I arrived penniless in Egypt, I managed to wangle a job as art director for Cairo Television, because I'd been a set designer in the theatre in the UK, and also I worked for the BBC TV. So the time there enabled me to acquire a typewriter and have time to develop my writing skills. But when I moved on, not wanting to give up my typewriter, I was daft enough to carry it around in my rucksack with reams of paper all down my wild travels of Africa. That was long before the days of iPads, unfortunately.
Oh, I know. I mean, I remember the days of carrying around typewriters and reams of paper, and and it's like I remember working on multiple books and going, wait, did I just add 50 pages to the wrong manuscript? So it was hard, and it's like, of course, like you talk about it being hot and the fans and stuff on, with the lights. It's like, I remember when I was writing and I didn't care how hot it was, I was not turning a fan on, because that was like a death knell to your manuscript, because like pages would just go flying off. So, but I mean, that is an incredible tale, and I just think that your books are really something very special. They have such creativity that we don't really see. We don't see often world travelers who who also write to give us that kind of experience. And I did love reading through your Old Mother West Wind tales, because it felt like it had like an international flavor to the tales, which was new, and I really did like that. So we're going to talk about that book. The Old Mother West Wind Tales is based on previously known fairy tales. So can you kind of tell us what inspired you to kind of rewrite, retell, reform these stories in a new way?
Yes, well, really, it was a nostalgic memory from my past. When I was 6 years old, the very first book that took my fancy when I pulled it off the shelf in the children's library was called Old Mother West Wind. And it was quirky and unusual, and having Old Mother West Wind carrying around a bag of her children that were called the Merry Little Breezes. And it captured my interest sufficiently so that I still remember the title, even years later when I became an adult. And later in life, when I became an author myself, I often wondered what it was that I enjoyed as a 6-year-old, so that I could write something similar for young children. So I searched in vain for a copy of the book in old bookstores and in charity shops, and without any success. And no one in the UK had ever heard of this book. Well, it wasn't until in the 80s, my 80s, that is, that I thought of typing in the name of the book into Google, and lo and behold, I discovered that it was an old American children's classic written by Thornton Waldo Burgess in 1910. So it was a huge thrill for me to find it again.
Right.
But however, on reading it with a more adult critical eye, I now found the narrative to be quite old-fashioned in style and a touch too moralistic for my taste, and with a number of plot holes in the stories, some of which just petered out with rather feeble endings. So when I was reading the reviews of the original book by present-day mums, I saw quite a few complaints about the awkward style of writing that made for difficulty in reading aloud and a few out-of-date attitudes that put them off from reading it to their children.
Right.
So when I discovered it was out of copyright, I decided it needed to be rewritten, and I decided to rewrite the whole book in a more lyrical and poetic style, specifically designed for reading aloud at bedtime. And there were also some omissions in the plots that needed developing and expanding. And I also wanted to introduce it to British children who had never heard of these stories. So after reading these reviews, I decided to redress all the issues that bugged modern mums. Like there being no females in the stories.
Right.
Burgess wrote the book for his son, so there were no nasty girls in the book.
Oh no.
That had to be put right. So I invented extra characters, some female characters, like the heroic little Zoe Otter, who saved Grandfather Frog from drowning. And I wanted to make the book more balanced and more compatible with the inclinations of parents and children of today.
Right.
And from the enthusiastic new reviews coming in, it seems I have succeeded in that. Everyone who reads it is delighted, especially adults. And many say it takes them back to the timeless world of their own childhood. So that was it. And I just added the word tales onto Old Mother West Wind in order to distinguish it from the original book.
Well, I have to tell you, when I was reading it in preparation of this interview, I really did feel transported back to my childhood when the style of fairy tales were a little less lyrical. They were a little more old-fashioned. They were a little more kind of this tone of do this, don't do that sort of thing. And that was what I loved about your book, is it still kind of held that old-fashioned storytelling, but in a new and modern way. And I really loved it. My favorite one out of the whole book, and I'm going to give you guys a little cheat here on it, but my favorite one was the story of Grandfather Bullfrog when he was talking about his missing tail. I had never heard that story before, and I was like, this is amazing. I loved it. It was so, just so imaginative, and it kind of held me in thrall, which is kind of something unique nowadays, because I read so many books and work with so many authors that it's like something that comes along that surprises me is always just incredible, because again, it was something new and I loved it. So I knew that you also added at the end of each chapter, you were adding helpful and informative information about the animal characters that were included in each of the tales. You do that at the end of the chapter, and I just wonder why you felt like that was something that was important to add to the book.
Well, as an educator myself, I realized that children have very inquiring minds. Well, that is before the schooling system educates them out of it. And when I read to children, they want to know how the animals live, what they eat, what their enemies are, and all that kind of thing. And although Burgess was supposed to be a naturalist, he wasn't always correct in his portrayal of the animals and their characteristic natures. I grew up wanting to be a naturalist, and so I deeply studied the natural world. And so I found a number of inaccuracies in the stories which needed correction. I wanted the animals and the birds to be authentically represented as to their natural inclinations. And many readers found these nature notes to be a valuable addition to the book. They seem to be loved by adults and children alike who could learn a lot of things. And adding them also proved to be a clincher for teachers and educators who found the book useful in classroom situations.
Right. Well, I know that as a former reading specialist and teacher, I did love that part about it. And I also enjoyed, just for myself, learning more about these different animals that are not always common to where I live, or that, I'm not out in nature enough to really observe them. And there was such great insight and really in-depth information without being really long. I mean, it's like a page or two each time. It gives you really good detailed information, and I do absolutely appreciate that. So I want to know what it is that you think your readers should glean from these books, or from this book.
Well, I hope they'll come away with a heart full of comfort and happy satisfaction, and a wish to read all the stories again, as many kids do, apparently, so mothers tell me. The latest reviewers are saying this book is a new classic in itself and likely to be passed down from generation to generation. So that's very heartwarming. And that's why I've also included a more kiddie-proof hardcover version that will hopefully last for generations. And above all, because of the nature notes, I hope I will have instilled a love of wildlife in young readers so that they'll want to learn much more about it and explore the world of nature for themselves.
Right. I did love that. And you do continue to have that sense of adventure and learning the whole way through while being extraordinarily entertaining. And I have to say, bravo, you did an excellent job with this. So you also have several books about spirituality, and it's a personal favorite topic for you. Why is that?
Oh, wow. That's a big subject. The thing is, I always considered myself an agnostic or a professional atheist all through my teenage. So my about face was all the more astonishing to me, as I had no interest in religion or spirituality, not that I even knew what it was. But for some unknown reason, in my early 20s, while I was hitchhiking around the world, I had a revelatory experience that changed the whole course of my life. On my travels, I stayed in Israel for a year, doing all kinds of jobs, but I overstayed my permit, so I had to get out of the country quickly. So I took a boat to the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. And unfortunately, I just had all my money stolen before I got on the boat. Apart from £7.50, £7.50, which I had in my pocket. And when I got there, I had no idea what to do or where to go from there. I was at a complete crossroads in my life. So I was sitting there on a bollard on the quayside, watching the sun go down, when something extraordinary occurred. I had this weird sensation as if some ghostly hand was creeping up the back of my neck and placing an etheric brain, like a ghostly brain, on top of mine. And I explain more in detail what happened in my book, Sharing the Quest. But in brief, my awareness expanded way beyond my body, across the land, across the ocean, out into space, until I realized that I was everywhere in the universe. And I was everything in the universe as the consciousness which composed the whole visible experience of existence. And during that experience, I don't know how long it lasted, but I was given insight into all kinds of spiritual knowledge. And I even understood things about the universe and consciousness that quantum scientists only began discovering 50 years later. So that incident changed my life forever. I had no idea what happened to me until I discovered a book called Cosmic Consciousness by Dr. Maurice Buck, a Canadian mystic and psychiatrist. And he explained what happened to me and to many others all through history, how it changed their lives and the lives of those people around them. So with my last £7, I took a boat to Egypt. And after I finished working at the job I managed to get in Cairo television, I carried on hitchhiking down the whole length of Africa. And during my travels, because of this experience, my body began gradually to refuse to absorb foods with blood, like meat, fish, and eggs. So I became a vegetarian. And I also gave up smoking. I threw my pipe and cigars into the River Nile. I stopped taking alcohol to keep my body and consciousness pure. And to find out more about what happened, I read everything I could get on about mysticism and the holy books, from the Bible to the Bhagavad Gita and everything else in between. And long story short, I ended up years later as a wandering monk for 3 years in India with a begging bowl, a loincloth and a turban, and studying with masters of every kind of tradition to get an all-round experience, because that cosmic experience was global, not attached to any particular tradition or religion. And all that culminated in the deep states known as samadhi, or self-consciousness. Self-realization, it is called in the mystic trade, which caused me to want to share the way to these experiences in my spiritual books. In brief.
Well, I feel the depth of that knowledge and that commitment and that spirituality in all of your books that I've looked at. And I think you bring that across. And I do want to try and get a copy of this book that you're talking about, The Quest, because I really think that that would be very valuable, because even though your journey led you to where you are now, it's like everybody's journey is different. And I think the fact that what it led you to was just seek more knowledge and more understanding is I think a lost art these days. I think people just want to take things at face value without investigation or self-determination, as you said. So I think that is amazing, and I can understand why you are a spiritual mentor, and your journey sounds absolutely amazing. I'm a little jealous that you got to go do all of these things, but that's okay. I can live vicariously through your stories. So we're
very dangerous, very hairy.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there were some moments that weren't all that memorable, or they were a little memorable for the wrong reasons. But what do they say about that? It's like, when you have a grand experience like that, it's like the bad moments kind of just disappear into the ether. So So we're going to talk a little bit about why you're here on the Writer's Parachute. Of course, we always talk to writers about their journey and about their experiences, and we know that most of them have some kind of obstacle or setback or stumbling blocks while they're writing, publishing, and marketing their books. So what do you think were your biggest lessons going through all of this? And what do you think you learned from them?
Well, my biggest problem was perfectionism. I wanted every bit of writing to be my very best before I could carry on to the next part. And that caused me years of wasted time. But luckily, I managed to overcome that hang-up and was able to write my books more quickly. My other struggle was with finding plots. I'm not a plotter. I never have one when I begin a book. For me, setting out a plot in advance is like painting in numbers. You know what's coming. So it's very boring and it leaves little room for sudden sparks of imagination. Just plodding along with what you know is coming.
Right.
Well, I'm a dedicated pantser, as we say in the author trade. I write by the seat of my pants until a story emerges, and then I begin to see what the book is going to be about.
Well, we actually, or several of people I know, and I generally classify that as more of an intuitive writer, in somebody that is able to trust the story and the characters within the story are going to carry you through whatever it is you're trying to tell. So you're more allowing the story and the characters to kind of guide you, where other people don't like kind of that just floating through the ether, hoping that it all comes together in the end. They prefer to plot and plan scene by scene. So I do get that, but I'm with you. I don't want to do the paint by numbers for my books. I do tend to be a little more intuitive with I sort of have an idea what the end's going to be. I have an idea where this beginning is going to be, and maybe a high point or two in the story. But other than that, I just kind of start off writing and let my characters just go. Give them a problem and let's see how they figure it out.
Yeah, I just had some charming characters I wanted to write about, but I had no story, so I just started writing about them.
Well, that sometimes is a good thing, and that's a good lesson for you if you are struggling with ideas or with being able to clarify those ideas or get them fully fleshed out. Maybe just sit down and start writing and see where it takes you, because I mean that's always a good way to jump in a different way. It's like if you're an intuitive writer, I do strongly suggest that you at least try a short piece with planning to see if maybe that's something that may work for you. And again, there's no hard and fast rules. There's only guidelines or guide rails in writing. So you might be an intuitive writer with a little bit of planning involved, or you may be fully intuitive with no planning. Or you might be a fully planner plotter, but using the intuitive writing or, in different scenes to kind of guide you through. So, it's always interesting to talk to different authors and writers about how they approach writing and what they see as the obstacles and problems for them, because I find that the more that we're different, the more that we're alike. So I appreciate you sharing with that. So we're going to do some just quick questions here and get you going on your day. So if you could talk to your younger self, what do you think the advice would be that you would offer?
I would first say, ignore what traditional publishers are telling you, because I found that so many publishers were stuck in the dinosaur age of thinking and publishing and had no idea what present day readers wanted. Dozens of publishers rejected Beatrix Potter's Peter Rabbit, and the same for Harry Potter or Watership Down or Dr. Seuss, Dickens' A Christmas Carol, The Martian, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and many others. So don't be disheartened if the publishers say, oh no, it's not for you, it's not the market. Nearly all these books were self-published before they became famous. So I say to young authors, don't be downhearted if publishers don't like your book. They don't know what they're missing. And I would say, for heaven's sake, stop mulling over every line you write and stop trying to get it all perfect before writing the next line. Just get on with it and write as it comes and keep going until you run out of steam. And then put your manuscript away for 3 months in a drawer, then pull it out and see what a load of rubbish it is and start editing and improving it with fresh eyes from there.
Right. That is excellent advice. I do talk about this a lot of times with my my writing groups and with my personal clients that I work with. It's like there does need to be a break, whether you go on to another project or another book or another manuscript or something. When you're finished, you do need to have that break to step back, because you kind of end up being so deep in the weeds you can't see that there's trees around you. So it's, or you obviously can't see the overall picture, you're only seeing the book in pieces, but you need to do step back. So that is excellent advice. So we want to know where we can get your books, and if you could just give us a list of those books that you have available and where they're available.
Well, there's one more piece of advice I would like to give to.
Absolutely.
Don't go to the traditional route, become an indie. That is, an independent publisher of your own books. Don't waste years looking for an agent or a traditional publisher. Even if by some miracle you are accepted after endlessly dispiriting rejection slips, why wait for 2 or 3 frustrating years until a publisher gets around to adding your book to his already overloaded schedule, when you can easily get it published yourself in 24 hours on Amazon? Most publishers will leave you to do the marketing yourself in any case. So why accept their measly 10% royalty when you can get 60 or 70% on Amazon and other places like that? And anyway, you don't need to chase publishers anymore. They have their scouts out, and they may pick up an indie book if they see it's doing really well. So then you cut out the middleman, the agent, and you save more on expenses. I've had 4 traditionally published books, and all the publishers screwed me in one way or another. So now I prefer total control of my creation, my content, and my cover, because publishers always got it wrong. So just be aware that there is a huge learning curve to do it yourself, and quite an expense. But so be prepared, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. And like I said, if you don't know the ins and outs of self-publishing, I guarantee you there are so many coaches and programs out there that are offered through, the different writing associations and writing groups. You can definitely get some help with that. And it's really not that complicated. A lot of the distributors nowadays, either through Amazon or through Ingram Spark, they will even give you guidelines and helpful information to kind of get you through that. So that's excellent advice. So again, we'll go back to the one question. Can you give us a list of your current books that are available and where we can buy them?
Yeah, well, my books are all over. They're available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo in Canada, Apple, Biblioteca, Smashwords, that's only ebooks. But you can also order them from libraries or bookshops if you take the ISBN, or you can get them direct from my website, www.muzmurray.com, if you live in the UK. because then you get it quicker than from Amazon.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and just for those listeners, I want to remind you that we will have links to everything in the show notes, so do go check those out. But I do have a coupon that's available through the end of July for Smash Words that is SSW50 to get 50% off of the books. Well, they're doing a 50% off of pretty much their entire line of books. So you could go pick up a couple of copies of Muz's books and maybe a couple of your other favorite authors. So that's an amazing coupon from Smashwords. So I do want to make sure our listening audience gets that. And again, if you didn't catch that, I will have it in the show notes for you. So you're also active on social media. Can you give us an idea of which social media platforms that you are on?
Yeah, well, I'm on my timeline on Facebook. I have a page for spiritual videos called Muz Murray's Inner Garden. And I have another page called Muz's Bedtime Stories, where I'm promoting Old Mother West Wind. I'm also on YouTube. I have about 50 videos on there or more. I'm on Pinterest, LinkedIn, and on Goodreads, and my website, of course.
Okay. All right. Well, that's amazing. And again, we will have a list of all of those so you can connect with Muz. We'll have a link to his website, to his YouTube channels, to his Facebook pages and groups, along with his other social media accounts. So you can definitely get in touch with Muz and talk to him about his different books. We have books on spirituality, and we also have books for children. So I really encourage you guys to go check those out. So what's next?
What's next?
Yes.
Well, exhaustion. My following is pressing me to get on with my autobiography, Memoirs of a Maverick Mystic, Journeys from Dali to Delhi. But that's going to be a long haul and long wait, I think. Meanwhile, my spiritual students are keenly awaiting my series on the mysteries of mantra, which is one of my specialities, as I've been teaching mantra workshops worldwide for the past half a century.
Okay.
But for the present, I'm just concentrating on getting Old Mother West Wind out into the world until her windiness managed to blow the book off the ground.
All right. So in what age group are you is the Old Mother West Wind Tales intended for? I mean, I know what age group I think it's intended for, but what was the intention when you wrote it?
I have mothers telling me they're reading it to 3-year-olds who can happily follow the plots. So that's a really good start. And I have grannies saying that any of their grandchildren up to 10, 12 love the book. And they're especially delighted with the nature notes and easy to read fun facts about the birds and animals and reptiles that follow each chapter. So you can hardly go wrong with any age, except caveat, there is a large gap between 12 and 50. That's when adults become old enough to start reading fairy tales again.
Well, and as a reading specialist, I'm going to just clue that in and clarify that a little bit more. I do believe that he is absolutely correct. Old Mother West Wind Tales pretty much is for any age. I think all of us would get something from it. I believe the readability, the age group would be considered a young reader or early middle grade, which would probably put it somewhere between the ages of 6 to 12. But obviously it can be read to a much younger audience. And I do think that some of the older audience, even into the teenage years, they're going to appreciate the fun and the lovability of these stories. But if you were looking specifically for someone reading ability, I would say probably 6 to 12 would be the age group for that. So Muz, can you hold up your books?
Oh,
Yeah. Not a problem. So here we have Old Mother West Wind Tales. I encourage you to go get that, even if it's only just to read the story about how the Frog King lost his tail. Sharing the Quest, one of his spiritual books.
yes, answering all questions of my students.
Awesome. And of
You
course, You Are the Light, which is his newest book, Secrets of the Sages Made Simple. So I hope you guys go check out Muz's book. I hope that you go watch some of his amazing videos where he's dressed up and he's reading some of the tales from Iffelpin Island and also from Old Mother West Wind Tales. I enjoyed those. Those were amazing. Also snuck over onto some of his Facebook pages to see what he's talking about. So check out all of his information, and we hope that you come back and join us again on your next visit, on your next book when it's available.
delighted to come back. It's a great fun with having rapport with you.
Oh, I enjoy this so much. It's like I didn't think I would, but it's turned into something that I look forward to week after week. A new author and writer and people associated with writing. It's been so much fun. We want to thank our special guest today, Muz Murray, for joining us. And I do encourage you to go grab a copy of Old Mother West Wind Tales if you have any children in your life. And even if you don't, I think you could sneak it under the pillow and read it at night. It would be a lovely kind of escape from some of the world today. So I thank you for being here, Muz. Be sure to come back when your next book is ready. And until next time, we hope that all of your writing and publishing dreams land well. Bye.
Bye-bye.